welcome to my talk. Who of you were here last year, where we started this Typespec journey? That's good. So I do a little recap because in the title it's about experiment to execution, what we actually, because I'm working for a consultancy in Germany, what we did with some customers in little tiny projects. Because we wanted to test if this is working, what Microsoft is doing at scale. Because this is something important to think about. Typespec is coming from Microsoft and is actually used there for the whole Azure environment to create APIs. So directly, sorry from my side, I don't show not so much code, because adoption of the things has nothing to do with developer-related stuff. So if you joined the talk yesterday from Antalya, it was more on the developer side. Now we are looking at it from an organizational perspective, because we want to adopt, and this is the real deal behind it. Because one of the things we do at Codecentric is understand APIs as digital products. And maybe Typespec could be a way to go. So, little recap here. So, what we see on the right side is actually a standard. This is OpenAPI. There's no version to it, so maybe it could be 3.2 or something like that. And on the other side, there's actually no standard. This is TypeScript model definition writing. This is what we use actually to create models in Typespec. So Typespec totally relies on TypeScript. So every one of you who's doing stuff in TypeScript, get an easy start to really get into it, because it's very easy, it's very native to look at things. Because when you look at a fragment on the left side, it's like, yeah, I have to read YAML and I have to know where the tabs are going. I have to know what actually is meant by that. And with this Typespec declaration, it's very short, very intense to really see what is happening there. So this is actually what we will look at and how we can actually adapt this into an organizational context, because this is what people are actually looking at when they want to have a tool be used. Because what we have actually is we have some kind of pains when we look at API description nowadays. It's really, we have inconsistency. It's really hard sometimes for teams to understand what other teams are doing. Because what we are lacking is governance. Because governance is hard to implement. Because there is no actually tool available. So please go to the vendors at the booth, ask them if they have a governance tool. They will say no. Maybe they will reflect to Spectral because they read about it. But in the end, normally when we as consultants go to our customers, we see governance in PowerPoint slides, or we see governance dying in Confluence because somebody put it there and nobody reads it. I have a story from a customer of us where we do trainings. We do these trainings, I would say, 3 times a year. And every time we talk with the people there, we ask them for the guidelines, if they have read them. What do you think is the answer of the people there? Yeah, what guidelines? I didn't find them. Oh, they're on Confluence. Oh, that's nice. I didn't see them. But they are actually the basic stuff to do the training, actually. And this is really funny there. So it's really hard to get into this, from this inconsistency type of thing there. And the idea is, with Typespec, to really use it as the somehow definition language to generate stuff out of it. That's the main idea. Having just one language to define things. And if you are a developer, you don't have to learn something new. When you're not on the TypeScript train, you maybe have to learn TypeScript to understand how the things are working there. But on the other side, for developers, it's actually quite easy to get into this, because it's like having a description of a model with some kinds of service descriptions and so on, and to make it really clear that we go there. So the thing is, this is what I did last year. I did an interview with Bill, and I said, welcome to the post-OpenAPI era. This was not really respected by people in the OpenAPI scene, because they thought, oh, what he's doing there, he's bringing something new into it. But in the end, none of us really knows the specification in all details, because it's quite hard. The OpenAPI specification is not easy to read. So when you go onto the fields of one of all of all, and all the things there, so that we go into polymorphism, it's really hard to understand how to deal this. And on the other side, the tooling is not already supporting everything. And when we look now at the specification side, it's always that we have now 3.2, but I think there's no real tool support for 3.2, because 3.2 was released 1 week before API Days, London, so it was in the middle of September. So you can't use the new specification because the tooling is not available there. And with Typespec, we don't have these things there because we are just, Natalia taught yesterday, emitting, and this is the real term there. We're just creating stuff by using emitters. And this is the only thing we have to do there. So when we started with customers, actually, we start small. That's why I said we did little projects with customers to really see what is happening in the field, how the adoption is there. Because when we look at this user API fragment, it's actually quite readable and really good understandable what is happening, because every one of us, even people who are using Java or other languages, know what annotations are. So it's really easy to see, okay, there's an annotation, there's a title in it, there's some kind of namespace, I have a model description, and I can describe a route. And with this, I can go into a fast feedback, not really think about, okay, I have to build something very big that people understand the value of what I'm using there. It's really start small and think about what is actually happening with the people involved. Because this, what we see here, is a mind shift. Because people have to think differently now, because they have to rely on annotations, they have to understand the TypeScript language, and so on and so on. So that's really enough things to think about when you do the enablement part there. When we go now into the scaling, it really gets more difficult, because we have to think about shared libraries, we have to think about reusable decorators there, and we have to think about governance by design. So you want to have people to use some kind of shared things and just import them, because they bring the governance into the game. And this is the real fun part, actually, because you don't only want to have the Typespec repro, so you don't want to have that somebody really relies on the OpenAPI's definition. So you just have the Typespec repro. So the people have to be very strong with this, and then they can generate, then they can validate the OpenAPI definition that has been created, and then this definition will be published. This is the scaling part, so that others understand what is actually happening there. Because you don't have to think about that everybody has to really think about in Typespec from the beginning. So it can just be one team, and then you can really scale. Because when more people understand the idea behind Typespec, it's getting more and more easy there. And as I mentioned, we're looking at this from a very enterprise architecture perspective, because we want to have guidance. Any one of you does not know where this little diagram is coming from? So are there folks here that don't know Archimate? Okay, that's fine. So Archimate is a somehow visualization diagram language of, in the space of enterprise architecture to very make clear that people understand also with a non-technical background what is actually happening there. So we have here some kind of applications components, and we have the OpenAPI definition there. So what is actually happening in this in our world right now is that we have some kind of adoption, but that does not mean that we have a replacement. So we just have the Typespec compiler here, which compiles the OpenAPI definition, and the OpenAPI definition is pushed to the portal, to an SDK generator, and to a CI/CD system. So we don't bring Typespec into the things into the lifecycle things we already have. So we really make sure that the compiler just compiles the definition, and the definition is been carried out into the fields where we're actually working with. This is not the idea of the people actually building Typespec at the moment. They want to be in the middle. But having the adoption problem because there's tooling available for OpenAPI descriptions. So nobody will replace their tool engines there. So you have SDK generators, you have the portals, being able to read the OpenAPI definitions, and you can put them into CI/CD systems. So it's just about the adoption way there. The idea is actually going further. So we actually have goals we want to reach, and we want to assess stuff there. And then we need some kind of API governance capability to really measure the things there. So we go into more details of this little diagram. We just look into the motivation phase. So why we would put on the effort to really integrate Typespec into the whole organization is really that we want to have API consistency. We want to have security compliance. We want to have manual, because we assessed actually the inefficiency of manual governance. So we want to have the automate governance checks there. Because what we want to do is, we don't want to be gatekeepers, because this is what is happening right now in organizations. When people are dealing with OpenAPI specifications or others, there are always these gatekeepers saying, yeah, we have these guidelines, you can't do this. Blocked, thrown away. But having some kind of more developer-related stuff with Typespec, we can really enable the developers there. Because they're doing the stuff they already actually know, so we can really enable them. And this leads actually to the goal of improving the API quality at scale. Because when we have convinced the developers that it's just a native step to do this, and not to think about, I have to write, because we heard even today we have to do API design first. I have to write a YAML file or a JSON file to do OpenAPI descriptions. Sometimes it's hard, because it's not that we have a shiny editor, because the shiny editor is not available anymore, because Stoplight is not there with the Stoplight Studio editor, which was there in the past. And now it's easier then to just reflect on what we know from the developer side. So just using this Typespec, some kind of definition there. Because what comes out of it is actually that we can build this API governance capability. Because this is what people are actually looking for when we talk about governance. With this API governance capability, we can actually define policy definitions. We can really bring people into the standardization and the training phase. And out of this comes actually then the technical component of having a governance engine. Because this is what you want to have when you go on scale in an enterprise, to really have a governance engine there. And this governance engine now leads to this automated validation, because there's this Typespec compiler and linter, and we have toolings and pipelines available, and we totally rely on shared libraries, so people can import stuff that is used in the company. Maybe you heard of the error code definition of 7897 RFC. So this is what really deals with, because when you have to train people into problem plus JSON, it's always hard. But when you have a shared library where everything is included, it's very easy. You can just say, okay, include the library, it's already working. There you have your failure descriptions, your error codes, everything is there. And this makes it easy to really go into the scene. The fair part to say it's, there's a long-running process. So it's not easy to just say from a developer perspective, oh, we use Typespec, it's quite fun. When you really wanted to have it scale, it's really a long distance to go. It's nothing that works out of the box. And looking at this Typespec compiler thing we saw earlier, it's really the idea to generate GraphQL schema. It's somehow in the future hopefully possible to create async API definitions. And what we are looking at customers right now is this open data contract standards. Yeah, description of data products, description of data contracts, because data contracts are nothing more than interface descriptions. And this would be also good that it could be described maybe with Typespec or being used by Typespec in some level. And with this, we are able to fill in actually documentation capabilities, governance capabilities, and also go into the idea of this SDK generation, because it's still needed, because people are looking for it. As you see, we have been on this journey since last year. We didn't do the adoption into MCP. But for me, actually, MCP, and Natalia showed it yesterday in this Typespec talk, in her Typespec talk, it's quite easy now to create an MCP server out of Typespec. And this could be then also another capability or another component into the whole system there. So, learnings. Typespec will not be the new silver bullet. So if you look at the playground, it's nice to work with it. You get a short onboarding phase, but it's not the silver bullet. So it's nothing you should look for, because it will maybe help you in a specific situation. Chris will talk about it later, where it helps him. And it's not really the bullet some people are still searching for. So it's more the enabler. So, and if you would like to use it, start small to really learn fast. And you really have to use shared libraries. This is the most important fact. So something people are not really using in the OpenAPI space, even if they're at scale, but with Typespec, you really should rely on shared libraries there. And on the other side, you should stay hybrid, because there will be new standards, there will be new things coming up, and it's better to really have it in a hybrid state to really move on fast, because if you rely too heavily on something like Typespec, it could be also a problem in the future, because because it's not a real standard right now, doesn't exist anymore, or somebody has other ideas with it, it could be a loose decision there. So a little question for you. What's actually your barriers to use Typespec? You have time to think about it, because we have the Q&A afterwards. Thank you.